Hello and welcome. I am Xlight and this is my channel. Today I'm going to talk about what causes someone to become a serial killer. Is it a malignant combination of factors? Is it their childhood? Are they born that way? I'm going to tell you what some psychologists think. If you would please give this video a thumbs up. If you're not subscribed, please do so. Nearly 70% of the people who watch my videos are not subscribed. It's free. It takes a minute. I'd appreciate it. And if you leave comments below, I'll leave a link to where I sell my art. You can take a look at it. Let's go. For decades, criminologists and true crime documentaries and people like us have attempted to understand what causes serial killers to commit the atrocities that they do. From Dennis Rader to John Wayne Gacy, Jeffrey Dahmer, Albert DeSalvo, and Ted Bundy, and they are just a few of the more than 3,600 serial killers documented in the United States as of 2020. Apparently, the University of Michigan keeps track of that. Are serial killers born this way, or are they a product of their environment? Dr. Scott Bond, who is a criminologist, an author, and a public speaker, says it's likely a combination of the two. Psychopaths are born that way. Sociopaths have been socialized into it, and there's a spectrum. It's not black or white, and there are a lot of factors involved. Dr. Louise Schlesinger, professor of forensic psychology at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, says it's just unknown, but there's a very strong neurobiological component to a serial killer or a sexual murderer because the sexual instinct is biologically determined. So, born that way. Dr. Catherine Ramsland, who is a professor of forensic psychology and criminal justice at DeSales University, says if you study one case, you can identify the influences, but you can't generalize that to all the other cases. You might find some things that they have in common in many cases, such as abuse or even head injuries, which Jeffrey Dahmer had. He had surgery and he woke up. His parents said he was a completely different person. But it's not going to be true of all serial killers. But there must be enough similarities that the FBI can do profiles. They've studied that for a long time. They interviewed all the major serial killers, probably some not so well known serial killers, and they came up with profiles. So there must be something. How do you know a murderer is a serial killer? Scott Bond says, the way you know that there's a serial killer is because they leave consistent markings, consistent evidence that you're dealing with the same individual. Louise Schlesinger says that if you look at serial sexual murders, they very often do things with the body that are above and beyond what is necessary to kill a person. Like they leave the victim in a degrading position with their legs spread open or with things placed inside of them, that kind of thing. And why did they do that? And the answer is because killing alone is not psychosexually sufficient. So they have to go above and beyond killing to gratify themselves. And many of those sexual killers, this is me talking, they oftentimes put their victims somewhere where they can go back, and as their body is degrading, they still commit sexual acts with them. Like um, the Green River Killer, for instance, he would do that. Several people have done that. What factors influence a person to become a serial killer? Catherine Ramsland says there's a great deal of variation in this population, from a range of motives, backgrounds, ages, behaviors, to differences in psychology, sex, mental state, and perceptions that influence reasoning and decisions. Each person uniquely processes a given situation in their lives, and some gravitate towards violence. This can be a defense for their inner child, violence or aggression, psychotic or a psychopath, reactive or predatory, to name some possibilities. Any factors, abuse, neglect, deviance, bullying, might have different influences on different people, and new experiences can modify the perceptions positively or negatively. I don't think that anybody is looking at abuse, neglect, deviance, or bullying in a positive manner, but they don't decide to become serial killers. Do all serial killers suffer some sort of trauma? Scott Bond says there can be a correlation between childhood trauma, but it's not enough to turn somebody into a serial killer. It's numerous factors that become a perfect storm that turn a person into a serial killer. Louise Schlesinger says that most people went to search for that watershed moment in someone's life that just clicks that dial. It's human nature. It's a natural tendency. He did it because his mother abused him. He did it because of this traumatic event happening, but you're not going to find it. Poor parenting and childhood trauma never helps you trying to find a serial killer. But those in and of themselves are not something that you can rule out either. They might create somebody who's going to go out and kill for sexual gratification. Thousands of people have had horrible childhoods, but they don't go around killing people. Are all serial killers psychopaths? Scott Bond says that not all psychopaths are serial killers, and not all serial killers are psychopaths. Being a psychopath alone does not make one a serial killer. Something else has to happen to push them over that edge. In the case of a serial killer who is a psychopath, their brain functions differently than a normal human brain. They process stimulus differently. In particular, the frontal lobe of the brain is where our impulses are controlled. The thing that keeps you from just acting out on your initial knee jerk reaction and from just acting impulsively. Psychopaths have virtually no impulse control. I've talked about this on here before. My brother is a diagnosed psychopath, and I can attest that he has no impulse control, virtually no impulse control. He lives by the reasoning that it's better to ask forgiveness than permission. And when we were growing up, my parents took him to get help because he was doing things like lighting fires, killing animals, dissecting animals, etc. And they knew that something was wrong. He was a perfect storm to be a serial killer. And I mean, he still could be a serial killer, but I don't think so. He'd have to be very good at hiding it and being a liar, and he's a terrible liar. But Um, it was to the point where my parents would keep our knives locked up and we weren't allowed to have any guns in the house. Many psychopaths function incredibly well, and in a society where achievement is profoundly important, these individuals are motivated, they're goal oriented, they're very driven. They are described as organized, very persuasive, very patient. There are characteristics that make a great architect or a great salesman, but they're also perfect attributes if you want to be a serial killer. Ask anybody if my brother is charming and funny and fun to be around. And I would say that 100% of the people would say absolutely. He can charm you. He's the funniest person I know. But those are also traits that disarm you and cause you to feel trust towards somebody that you should not trust. I mean, he's not probably a serial killer, but he's also not trustworthy. Louis Schlesinger, who is really obsessed with sexual serial killers, says the American people want their serial sexual murderers to be evil geniuses with IQs of 180 that speak 5 languages. Nothing could be further from the truth. The vast majority are unskilled, unemployed, menial work type people, Bundy was an outlier. My brother has an IQ of 170. He is mostly unemployed, has done mostly menial work, but he is actually very, very intelligent. If he put all the effort that he does into the nutty stuff that he does, he could have been anything he wanted to be. While we're talking about it, what is a serial sexual murderer? The sexual urges, sexuality, and arousal become intertwined and twisted with harming things and sadism and blood and obsession with hurting and death. When that happens, it sets off a trajectory that leads one to become a sexual sadist. This doesn't happen overnight. No one wakes up one morning and says, "Today is a great day to become a serial killer." What happens is these impulses begin to take off right around adolescence, close to 11 or 12 years old. It becomes like a fantasy that loops over and over in their minds until they want to act on it. Their fantasies are going to have bondage and essaying and killing, and they become aroused by that. This reaches like a pinnacle around the age middle 20s, where these fantasies can no longer just be in their daydreams. Now, many people, not just serial killers, regular everyday people, have sexual fantasies that they keep to themselves. The question is, if there's a large number of people with very deviant sexual fantasies getting arousal, for example, from inflicting pain on others, or having pain inflicted on you, or torturing, why does a small number act out? Just a small number. We don't know. But what seems to happen is that there's a point in which there's a trigger, a loss of some type, which begins them acting out. It could be the loss of a job. It could break up with their partner. And incidentally, this is a male situation. There has never been, well, on record, a female serial sexual murderer. And lastly, are there any signs that suggest that someone might be a serial murderer? Louise Schlesinger. I have 10 ominous signs, when seen in combination, that indicate a risk for a potential sex murderer. 1. Childhood abuse is number 1. And that one has a very low predictability. There's a lot of people who are abused as children. Number 2. Inappropriate maternal sexual contact. Boys need to see their mothers as asexual. When an adolescent boy sees his mother behaving sexually, it's very, very destabilizing. 3. Pathological lying and manipulation. 4. Sadistic fantasy with a compulsion to act. 5. Animal cruelty, particularly towards cats, because cat is a female symbol, and that is exactly what my brother, the animals that my brother would kill in many different manners, were always cats. 6, they need to control and dominate others. 7, repetitive fire setting. I'm telling you, maybe he is a serial killer. 8, voyeurism, fetishes, and sexual burglaries. Sexually motivated burglary. So I'm assuming this means breaking in and stealing women's underwear. Number 9, unprovoked attacks on females associated with generalized misogynistic emotions. Number 10, evidence of ritualistic or signature behavior. All right. I hope you found that interesting. Thank you for coming to my channel. Please don't forget to subscribe, give it a thumbs up, leave a comment, go check out my art if you want. Good night.